everyone, and thanks for joining us this half hour of World News. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up on the program. 6 crew members confirmed dead as U.S. military refueling aircraft crashes in Iraq. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the U.S. will launch its highest volume of strikes over Iran in the coming days. Plus, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer says the incident in which a vehicle rammed into a temple Israel synagogue on Thursday night was anti-Semitism and pure hate. Let's get into it. We're starting off in the Middle East, where 4 of 6 members of a U.S. military refueling aircraft crew have been confirmed dead after it crashed in western Iraq by the United States Central Command following the loss of the KC-135. The U.S. had earlier said that neither hostile nor friendly fire was involved in the downing of the aircraft. CENTCOM describes the crash as happening over friendly airspace. The Boeing-manufactured aircrafts are mostly capable of refueling planes mid-air and typically play a major role in U.S. military operations. They were used extensively in the first Gulf War to extend the range of fighter jets and bombers. The tanker had been involved in ongoing U.S. operations against Iran and was one of the 2 aircrafts involved in the incident. The second landed safely. The U.S. military says 2 crew members who were unaccounted for after the refueling of the plane crashed over western Iraq have now been confirmed dead, and this brings the total number of those killed in the crash to 6. Well, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the U.S. will be launching its highest volume of strikes over Iran as it continues decimating Iran's military. He was speaking at a press conference earlier today at the Pentagon after the crash of the refueling plane. He said, "We're shooting down and destroying what missiles they have in stock, and more importantly, ensuring they have no ability to build more." He said Iran has no functioning air force, air defense, or navy, and that its missile volume is down 90%, and that Iran would be incapable of building more weapons, and soon all of their defense companies will be destroyed. On the Strait of Hormuz, Hegseth accused Iran of sheer desperation, but claimed the United States is dealing with it. He said Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, is in hiding, wounded, and likely disfigured. He also talked about, he was also joined at the press briefing by Military Chief General Dan Kane, who said the U.S. priority is targeting Iran's mine-laying enterprise in the Strait of Hormuz, asking about the fatal strike on the girls' primary school in Iran by reporters. The U.S. Secretary Pete Hegseth said the U.S. is investigating and insisting that ongoing U.S.-Israeli operations never targeted civilians in the war with Iran.
That the United States is decimating the radical Iranian regime's military in a way the world has never seen before. Never before has a modern, capable military, which Iran used to have, been so quickly destroyed and made combat ineffective, devastated. We said it would not be a fair fight, and it has not been. As I stated during our first press conference on day 2, that was 10 short days ago, the combination of the world's 2 most powerful air forces is unprecedented and unbeatable. Between our air force and that of the Israelis, over 15,000 enemy targets have been struck. That's well over 1,000 a day. No other combination of countries in the world can do that. So today, as we speak, we fly over the top of Iran and Tehran. Fighters and bombers all day, picking targets as they choose. As our intelligence gets better and better and more refined. Looking up, the IRGC and Iranian regime sees only 2 things on the side of aircraft: the Stars and Stripes and the Star of David. The evil regime's worst nightmare. Iran has no air defenses. Iran has no air force. Iran has no navy. Their missiles, their missile launchers and drones being destroyed or shot out of the sky. Their missile volume is down 90%. Their one-way attack drones yesterday, down 95%. And as the world is seeing, they are exercising sheer desperation in the Straits of Hormuz. Something we're dealing with, we have been dealing with it, and don't need to worry about it. We're on plan to defeat, destroy, disable all of their meaningful military capabilities at a pace the world has never seen before.
The United Arab Emirates air defenses have engaged 7 missiles and 27 drones coming from Iran today. According to its defense ministry, since the start of Iran's brazen attacks, the ministry has dealt with 285 ballistic missiles, 15 cruise missiles, and 1,567 drones. And in the first 10 days of the war, the UAE stood out as sharing detailed numbers on the missiles and drones attacking its airspace, as well as successful interceptions. And for instance, that as of March 8th, a total of 1,422 unmanned aerial vehicles have been detected, 1,342 of which were intercepted. All 8 threatening cruise missiles have been taken out. But for the last 2 days, it appears the Emirati government changed tack, posting only the number of missiles and drones it has engaged with on that day. Now, in all, the Ministry of Defense says the attacks have resulted in some fatalities, at least 6. The ministry did not immediately respond to a request about the change today. As you can tell, we're very U.S. heavy today. In the state of Michigan, Governor Gretchen Whitmer says an incident in which a vehicle rammed into the Temple Israel Synagogue on Thursday night was anti-Semitism and pure hate. No staff or children at the synagogue or attached preschool in West Bloomfield, Michigan was hurt, where more than 100 children were attending school. But according to a security guard, the incident has been the security guard, at the incident is being treated for injuries. The suspect has been identified, though. He is Ayman Muhammad Ghazali, a 41-year-old man. He was a naturalized citizen of the United States. He was born in Lebanon. He also came to the U.S. in 2011. He died at the scene of the incident on Thursday at the Temple Israel. The FBI says it is investigating the incident as a targeted act of violence against the Jewish community, but has not released a motive yet. The suspect's vehicle was traveling with purpose down the hall of the building before it was neutralized by security guards. Senator Elissa Slotkin says she grew up around the community and the public has a responsibility to call out anti-Semitism on the left and the right of the political spectrum. Staying with more reactions and development from the war in Iran, the Nigerian government has begun evacuating citizens stranded in Iran amid the ongoing conflict and the bombings in Tehran and other cities. Officials from the Nigerian embassy are escorting citizens safely across the Armenian border, where government teams are stationed to assist all evacuees. Authorities say no Nigerian has so far been harmed. The number of citizens evacuated has also not been disclosed, but the government assures a secure passage for those wishing to leave. African nations are acting quickly to repatriate their citizens, following similar efforts by Tanzania and others in the region. Meanwhile, Iranian authorities report more than 1,200 deaths and around 10,000 injuries from the conflict. And nearly 3 weeks into the U.S.-Israel war with Iran, the economic fallout continues to intensify. Little signs of relief seen after Tehran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, vowed to keep the Strait of Hormuz closed. Meanwhile, as the Muslim community observes the holy month of Ramadan, participants at the annual Friendship and Dialogue Iftar dinner in Johannesburg are calling for peace, unity, and renewed dialogue to ease tensions in the Middle East. Our South Africa correspondent, Innocent Musa, has more on this.
As a community, we will not emerge unscathed from this. Our public finances are likely to come under even a greater strain. And it's our people who will bear the cost. There is also a growing concern that the Gulf states may reassess overseas investments in infrastructure, critical minerals, energy, and technology, as their priorities shift towards internal defense and security considerations. These could carry consequences for investment flows, growth prospects, and the development finance across our region. Our region is facing these external shocks while already carrying a severe debt burden. Indeed, the African Leaders Debt Relief Initiative has described the present moment as the worst debt crisis in 8 years. Today, more than 750 million Africans live in countries that spend more on debt servicing than on health and education. In too many cases in our region, spending on interest payments far exceeds investment in schools, hospitals, and other social priorities. While we have used multilateral platforms and global partnerships to draw attention to these pressures and advocate concrete solutions, conflicts on this scale can put the brakes on these efforts. It is no exaggeration to say that it threatens to deepen our vulnerabilities and further delay our development ambitions.
That is South Africa's Foreign Minister Ronald Lamola issuing warnings that rising geopolitical tensions are putting Southern African economies under pressure. He was speaking at the South African Development Community Council of Ministers meeting in Pretoria. He urged regional leaders to strengthen industrialization, agriculture, and energy systems to protect against economic shocks. With a lot going on and the U.S. being heavy in the news today, our correspondent Maria Bird is standing by with more on, the deaths of the U.S. Servicemen, as well as other issues surrounding this war in Iran. Maria joins us via audio. Maria, the U.S. does appear to be losing valued servicemen in this war in Iran. 6 of the crew members have been killed as they were refueling a plane that crashed in Iraq. The other time they lost 7 troops. What is the U.S. government reading, from, these incidents, and how can they say that they're still winning in this war with Iran?
I think that you bring up some very key points that many Americans are asking. They're asking, how are we losing servicemen? What we know is that anywhere in the Middle East right now is not a secure area for Americans, despite, I think, what might be the sentiments and the thoughts around, especially over some of the areas that the U.S. believes it has occupied as far as military occupation in those regions. So this is just another sign that we are definitely very vulnerable, especially in that region. And potentially, when we look at what the president has been very clear about, the war will be ending soon, Americans are looking and wondering, what does that really mean? We've heard a little bit from the new Supreme Leader. We know that most of his family has been killed. We know that there are very clear signs that Iran plans to respond, and the retaliation is happening even around what we're seeing with the shortage in oil, and obviously some of the other constraints in the servicemen that are being brought home. As you mentioned, there were 7 previously. Now we're talking about 6. What are we going to see over the next few days? And so I think that is where the concern is for many Americans.
And you hear the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth talking about the U.S. launching its highest volume of strikes over Iran. He says America's winning the war. They have decimated all of Iran's weaponry. Iran's missile volume is down 90%. All of it will be destroyed. Iran is, the message in Iran is a lot different from what the United States is, propagating. And there are fears that America could be targeted in one of these airstrikes. I wonder if the Defense Secretary is considering the risks he's putting not just American servicemen, but also American people's lives with some of the rhetoric he's giving at these press conferences.
Yes, as you know, the U.S. has been very strategic around nuclear weaponry in Iran for many years. The President Trump, is one of the first presidents that's taken this type of a stance that has led to a war and conflict in very recent years that we've seen. And as you mentioned, some of the threat in the U.S. on U.S. soil, I think, is of what's the greatest concern. Obviously, there have been talks around if California is at risk, looking at if there's drones that are going to be headed toward that direction. As you mentioned, airstrikes, because that's a little bit more of a vulnerable side of the country. And so I think that's what Americans are concerned about. We have not seen that type of threat here in the U.S. and that type of a crisis since 9/11. And even when we think about 9/11, it was very different circumstances around the 9/11 attacks. And so when we think about, we've seen just yesterday evening, there was someone that went onto a university campus and rang out in shots, and they had affiliation with ISIS and had been arrested several years ago. So we know that right here, even in the United States, there are some individuals who are angered, who are upset, and who might even try certain terrorist attacks right here at home. There's been airports that have been evacuated. So the security measures here in the United States are on heightened alert. And I still think that many Americans are just wondering whether or not we could see some greater challenges beyond what we've talked about with cybersecurity attacks that have obviously happened, but even some things coming over shores. So that is, I think, of the number one focal point, and wondering how the War Secretary plans to respond and protect Americans from that.
And what about the other impacts of this war? The gas prices rising because of global oil prices, and the Strait of Hormuz remains closed. The new Iranian leader saying that the strait will remain closed, and then he also promises a revenge, of the blood that has been shed in Iran. How do the American people feel, and how are they reacting to this?
Yes, well, the American people are definitely very much concerned about that. I think that, as you mentioned, blood being shed, and that is, I think, where Americans are their focal point at this time. They are wondering whether or not this is something that we could see moving forward. And so when you think about what the War Secretary has put his focal point on, and where his conversations are, and just ensuring that, number one, the focus on security and intellection, I think, is one of the key pieces here as well. They're trying to really identify what type of intelligence the War Secretary has and his team has around where there could be other nuclear bombs. And so when we think about what will be next, I think what's going to be clearly one of the next steps is hearing for how they plan to address it and to bring down the tensions, and what conversations the U.S. will plan to have with the new Supreme Leader.
Well, I can imagine your head is spinning with all of this information, reeling out of the United States. Almost every official is on top of, the war in Iran and has something to say. Maria, thanks for bringing us up to speed on this.
Thank you.
And now to Germany, where the country's legacy automaker is in hot water. Famed automaker Volkswagen is seeing dwindling profits and may have to slash thousands of jobs. What's behind Volkswagen's crisis? We'll turn now to the DW correspondent, Vada Imran in Berlin. Vada, great to see you. What do Volkswagen's 2025 numbers tell us, and is there panic?
So there is a sense of panic in the industry and among people, especially employees. But I have to say the writing was on the wall for Volkswagen. And this week they presented their 2025 financial statements, very core to the company. And the response here in Germany was of shock. The company's annual profit is lowest in a decade. Even the COVID-19 pandemic didn't knock Volkswagen off its feet as much as the last year. 2025's profit sat at just shy of 7 billion euros, while the last 6 years have seen figures north of 18 billion euros in profit annually. So the gap here is massive. And the impact of that will be felt across the company. 50,000 jobs are at stake, 35,000 jobs will be cut at Volkswagen itself, and the rest will be split between Audi and Porsche. Now, Porsche's profit has fallen by 98%, so things are not looking good here at all. But when you listen to the Volkswagen leadership, it's important to know what they're saying. They blame external factors for this. They said 2025 was shaped by, quote, geopolitical tensions, tariffs, intense competition, and this, they say, is behind the abysmal numbers. Now, the U.S. tariffs also cost Volkswagen around 3 billion euros just last year, so the profit percentage dropped further. Basically, their finances paint a rather bleak image of the industry here.
Yeah. And how is Volkswagen's global presence in major markets like China and the U.S.?
So Volkswagen's leadership does shift the blame to the lack of demand in China. You'll hear China come up often when they speak about it. Now, China is traditionally Volkswagen's largest market. The highest levels of demand stemmed from there. That isn't the case anymore. And so VW is stuck in the China loop, consistently trying to get back into the market, where intense competition from competitors like Geely and BYD are overtaking VW. And that's not all. The war in Iran is also testing Volkswagen because that means the demand for Porsche's luxury cars are very low. The Volkswagen CEO said, quote, the business model that's carried us for decades no longer works in its current form. Now, in the U.S., that's been tough for Volkswagen because, again, it's a massive market for the legacy automaker. And I think that there were tons of negotiations between VW and the U.S. government last year about tariffs. But things change so often in the U.S. that we can't say for sure what Volkswagen's future there will be.
I can imagine. So what does this say about the rest of Germany's auto industry?
Well, for months, analysts had been talking about how the car industry is at a crossroads. It's in trouble. It needs a savior. There was talk of whether, German politicians are to blame for the state of the industry. But here are the facts. A recent study showed that German exports to China dropped significantly. And this is a big reason behind kind of the deteriorating of the industry. The value of automotive and parts exports dropped below 14 billion euros. Now, this is down from 30 billion euros in 2024. And this is surprising given how massive the auto exports market is. And it's not that sales across the board are bad. They're actually in line with previous years. It's a mixture of sluggish EV demand in Europe, divided opinions on electrification, tariffs, taxes, bureaucracy, and that results in an industry on edge that needs a vision for the future.
Well, Vanda, thanks again for the analysis and the reporting on this one. As we end the program today, a squirrel monkey named Richter is being hand-raised at a Santilla Zoo in Spain's Cantabria after his mother stopped caring for him, leaving zoo staff, there he is, to intervene to ensure his survival, and one of which is providing him a soft toy and a blanket for comfort. We hope that's working. The toy is expected to be temporary as while Richter is small, he usually would have climbed on top of his mother, and later his mother will tell him to go on his own. But, when that time comes, I guess the toy will no longer be needed. But for now, it is providing the comfort Richter does need in some instances. Monkeys are highly social animals whose emotional well-being depends on close relationships and group dynamics. Isolation can cause stress, abnormal behavior, and difficulties integrating, while infant abandonment in monkeys remain relatively rare, affecting only around 1 to 3% of newborns. Well, any infant abandoned is at risk of not developing socially. But thanks for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Obadi. See you next time.